Sarah Chin always sat quietly in seat 14A, invisible to everyone around her. She never spoke to other passengers or the flight attendants. Nobody knew she was a trained pilot. But when both pilots collapsed during Flight 447 and panic filled the cabin, the quiet girl would become everyone's only hope for survival. Before watching the full story, comment below where you're watching from. Also, like and subscribe for more stories. Sarah Chin walked slowly through Denver International Airport on a bright Tuesday morning. She was 28 years old but looked younger. She wore simple blue jeans and a plain black jacket. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She carried a small backpack and a black laptop bag. Sarah always kept her head down when walking through crowded places. She did not like making eye contact with strangers. She preferred to be invisible. Sarah found her gate and sat down quietly. She opened her laptop and began typing. Other passengers talked loudly around her. Business people made phone calls. Families with children ran around the waiting area, but Sarah stayed focused on her computer screen. Nobody paid attention to the quiet girl sitting alone in the corner. When boarding began, Sarah waited until her row was called. She walked onto Flight 447 and found her window seat 14A. The airplane was a Boeing 737 with 150 passengers. Sarah put her backpack under the seat in front of her and opened her laptop again. A businessman in his 50s sat down in seat 14B next to her. He wore an expensive suit and talked loudly on his phone about some business deal. He never looked at Sarah or said hello. Across the aisle in seats 14C and 14D sat a young mother with twin boys who were about 6 years old. The boys were excited about flying and kept asking their mother questions. "Mom, how high do we fly? Mom, why are the wings moving?" The mother looked tired and stressed. She also did not notice Sarah at all. Flight attendant Melissa walked down the aisle checking seat belts and overhead bins. Melissa was in her 30s with blonde hair and a bright smile. She stopped to chat with the businessman. "First time flying to Los Angeles?" she asked him. "No, I fly this route every month for work," he replied. Then Melissa moved on without speaking to Sarah. Sarah had already buckled her seatbelt and gone back to her laptop. She was invisible to everyone. Sarah's laptop screen showed aviation weather reports and flight planning software. She studied wind patterns and checked runway conditions at Los Angeles International Airport, but nobody could see what she was working on. They all assumed she was just another passenger doing regular computer work. Sarah had a secret that nobody knew. Her father had been a commercial airline pilot for 20 years. When Sarah was young, her father taught her everything about flying. He took her to the airport and showed her how airplanes worked. He taught her to read weather reports and understand radio communications. When Sarah turned 18, she started flight training school. She wanted to become a pilot like her father. But during Sarah's second year of flight school, tragedy struck. Her father was flying a small private plane when it crashed in bad weather. He died instantly. Sarah was heartbroken and traumatized. She quit flight school and never flew again. The pain was too much. Instead, she became a computer software engineer. She got a job designing navigation systems for aircraft companies. This let her stay connected to aviation without having to fly. Sarah was flying to Los Angeles for work. Her company was installing new computer systems at LAX airport. She had not been on an airplane in 5 years. Her hands shook a little as the plane prepared for takeoff, but she knew she had to face her fears. In the cockpit, Captain Rodriguez and First Officer James completed their pre-flight checks. Captain Rodriguez was 52 years old and had been flying for 25 years. He looked tired this morning and rubbed his chest several times. First Officer James was only 29 and had been flying commercially for 3 years. He was eager and nervous. "Weather looks perfect for Los Angeles today," Captain Rodriguez told his young co-pilot. "Should be a very smooth flight. No storms along our route." "Yes, sir. All systems are showing green lights," James replied. He was always formal and respectful with senior captains. Flight 447 pushed back from the gate at exactly 8:30 a.m. Sarah closed her laptop and looked out the window. She watched the ground crew remove the wheel chocks and disconnect the power cables. Even though flying scared her now, she still loved watching all the precise procedures that made flight possible. Her father had taught her that aviation safety came from following exact procedures every time. The airplane taxied to runway 25 and waited for clearance from air traffic control. Sarah could hear the engines spooling up for takeoff. She gripped her armrest but tried to stay calm. The businessman next to her was reading a financial newspaper. The mother across the aisle was trying to keep her twin boys in their seats. Denver Tower, Flight 447 ready for takeoff, Captain Rodriguez radioed. Flight 447, you are cleared for takeoff runway 25. Contact departure control after airborne, came the reply. The Boeing 737 accelerated down the runway and lifted smoothly into the clear Colorado sky. Sarah watched the ground fall away below them. Despite her fears, she felt a small thrill seeing the earth from above. Her father had always said that flying was the closest thing to magic that humans had achieved. 30 minutes into the flight, they were cruising at $35,000 FT above the Rocky Mountains. The airplane flew smoothly through calm air. Passengers settled into their routines. Some read books or magazines. Others watched movies on their phones or tablets. The twin boys across from Sarah were playing video games. Their mother had fallen asleep. The businessman next to Sarah ordered coffee from Melissa when she came by with the drink cart. "Just black coffee for me," he said. Melissa smiled and poured his coffee. She did not ask Sarah if she wanted anything. Sarah was reading something on her laptop and seemed busy. Melissa assumed the quiet girl did not want to be bothered. Sarah was actually monitoring air traffic control frequencies on her laptop. This was something her father had taught her. She liked to listen to pilots and controllers talking to each other. It made her feel connected to the aviation world that she had left behind. She heard Flight 447's call sign occasionally as they flew through different air traffic control sectors. Everything seemed normal and peaceful, but Sarah noticed something that others missed. There was a very slight vibration coming from the left engine. It was so subtle that only someone with training would feel it. Sarah remembered her father teaching her to notice small changes in aircraft behavior. "The airplane always talks to you," he used to say. "You just have to listen." At 9:45 a.m., disaster struck without warning. Captain Rodriguez suddenly grabbed his chest and gasped for air. His face went pale, and he slumped forward in his seat. He was having a heart attack. First Officer James looked over in shock and saw his captain unconscious. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," James immediately radioed. "Denver Center, this is Flight 447. We have a medical emergency. Captain is unconscious. Requesting immediate diversion to nearest airport." "Flight 447, this is Denver Center. Copy your Mayday call. State your position and souls on board." "Denver Center, Flight 447 is 60 miles west of Denver at flight level 350. We have 150 souls on board plus crew. Captain appears to have suffered a heart attack." In the cabin, passengers began to notice the commotion. Melissa rushed to the cockpit with the emergency medical kit. She found Captain Rodriguez unconscious and First Officer James trying to fly the plane while also helping his captain. James looked panicked and overwhelmed. He had never handled an emergency like this before. "Is there a doctor on board?" Melissa announced over the intercom. "We have a medical emergency. Please ring your call button if you are a medical professional." A doctor from seat 23F came forward to help with Captain Rodriguez. But the bigger problem was that James was struggling to control the aircraft. His hands were shaking, and he was sweating heavily. The stress was overwhelming him. Passengers started to sense something was seriously wrong. The businessman next to Sarah asked, "What's happening? Why are we changing course?" The mother with twin boys woke up and looked worried. People began whispering and looking around nervously. Sarah could feel the airplane making unusual movements. The autopilot was engaged, but someone was making frequent control inputs. She could hear stress in First Officer James's voice over the radio. Sarah's aviation training told her that the crew was in trouble. Then the worst happened. First Officer James suddenly grabbed his head and collapsed over the controls. The extreme stress had caused him to have a severe panic attack and lose consciousness. The airplane lurched as his body hit the control stick. Now both pilots were unconscious and Flight 447 was flying on autopilot with nobody trained to land it. Melissa screamed from the cockpit, "Help! Both pilots are down. We need help immediately." The cabin erupted in panic. Passengers realized they were in mortal danger. Women started crying. Children began screaming. Men shouted questions that nobody could answer. The businessman next to Sarah demanded, "What do you mean both pilots are down? Who's flying the plane?" Sarah felt her heart pounding, but her father's training kicked in. She remembered his voice. "In an emergency, stay calm and think clearly. Panic kills people, training saves lives." She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, but then sat back down immediately. She was terrified of revealing herself. What if she made things worse? What if people did not believe her? She had always been the quiet, invisible girl who never spoke up. But as the panic grew worse and Melissa kept calling for help, Sarah knew she had no choice. Lives depended on someone taking action. She took a deep breath and walked toward the front of the cabin. "I can help," Sarah said quietly to Melissa. Melissa looked at her desperately. "Do you know anything about flying planes?" Sarah nodded. "My father was a commercial pilot. I completed 2 years of flight training school. I also worked designing navigation systems for aircraft." The businessman from 14B had followed Sarah forward. "You cannot let some random girl fly this airplane," he shouted. "She's probably lying. She'll kill us all." But Melissa grabbed Sarah's arm. "You're our only hope. Please help us." Sarah looked at the unconscious pilots and the complex instrument panel. Her hands trembled as she sat down in the captain's seat. She had never flown anything this large before, but the basic principles were the same as smaller aircraft. Her father had always said that good pilots could adapt to any airplane. The radio was crackling with air traffic control trying to contact them. Sarah picked up the microphone with shaking hands. "Denver Center, this is a passenger on Flight 447. Both pilots are unconscious. I have flight training and I'm going to try to fly the aircraft." There was a long pause. Then the controller replied in a shocked but professional voice. "Flight 447, say again. Did you say a passenger is now flying?" "That's correct, Denver Center. I'm Sarah Chin. I have completed 2 years of commercial pilot training and I work with aviation systems. I need all the help you can give me." "Roger, Sarah, stand by. We're getting our best instructor pilot on the radio right now." Sarah looked at the instrument panel. It was more complex than the small training aircraft she had flown, but she recognized most of the displays. The autopilot was maintaining their altitude and heading, which gave her time to study the systems. She checked the fuel gauges. They had about 90 minutes of fuel remaining, which should be enough to reach Los Angeles. Behind her in the cabin, passengers were a mixture of terrified and angry. Some people were praying loudly. Others were demanding to know what was happening. The businessman kept insisting that Sarah could not possibly know how to fly. "She's just a kid. This is insane." But an elderly man in seat 31A stood up and said in a firm voice, "Let her try. She's our only chance. Everyone needs to stay calm and let her concentrate." A few minutes later, a calm, authoritative voice came over the radio. "Sarah, this is Captain Williams. I'm a flight instructor with 30 years of experience. I'm going to talk you through everything step by step. First, tell me your exact flight training background." Sarah replied, "I completed ground school and about 50 hours of flight time in single-engine aircraft. I also have instrument training. I work for NAVC Systems designing flight management computers, so I understand most aircraft systems." Captain Williams sounded relieved. "That's excellent background, Sarah. You have the knowledge to do this. We're going to take this very slowly and carefully." Sarah began working through procedures with Captain Williams's guidance. She studied the aircraft systems, confirmed their position, and reviewed approach charts for Los Angeles International Airport. Her confidence grew as she realized that her training was adequate for this situation. The passengers gradually became quieter as they watched Sarah work competently at the controls. She explained what she was doing so people would not be afraid. "We're currently 1 hour and 15 minutes from Los Angeles. The aircraft is flying normally and we have plenty of fuel. I'm working with air traffic control to plan our approach and landing." Melissa helped by keeping passengers calm and providing information about the unconscious pilots. The doctor who was treating Captain Rodriguez reported that both men were stable, but would not regain consciousness soon enough to help with landing. As they got closer to Los Angeles, the situation became more challenging. LAX was busy with dozens of other aircraft landing and taking off. Sarah would need to follow specific approach procedures while managing the aircraft's complex systems, but Captain Williams was patient and thorough in his instructions. "Sarah, you're doing beautifully," he said over the radio. Now we're going to begin our descent. I want you to disconnect the autopilot altitude hold and manually reduce power to 85%. Then start descending at 500 ft per minute. Sarah's hands were steady now as she followed the instructions. The Boeing 737 responded smoothly to her control inputs. She was no longer the quiet, invisible girl from seat 14A. She was a pilot doing what she had been trained to do, even though she had never expected to use these skills to save lives. The most difficult part was the final approach to the runway. Sarah had to control the aircraft's speed, altitude, and alignment with the runway while managing throttles, flaps, and landing gear. The airplane was much heavier than her training aircraft, and the controls felt different. But Captain Williams talked her through every step. Perfect, Sarah. You're lined up beautifully with runway 24 left. Reduce power to 70% and continue your descent. You're doing this exactly right. The passengers could see the runway growing larger through the windows. Some people held hands and continued praying. Others watched Sarah with amazement as she confidently worked the controls. Even the businessman who had doubted her was now watching in respectful silence. The Boeing 737 touched down smoothly on the runway at Los Angeles International Airport. Sarah applied wheel brakes and reverse thrust exactly as Captain Williams instructed. The aircraft rolled to a stop as emergency vehicles surrounded them with flashing lights and sirens. Flight 447, welcome to Los Angeles, Captain Williams radioed. Sarah, that was an absolutely perfect landing. You saved every life on that airplane. The cabin erupted in cheers and applause. Many passengers were crying with relief and joy. The businessman came forward to Sarah and said, I owe you a huge apology. I was wrong to doubt you. You saved all our lives. Melissa hugged Sarah tightly. I will never forget what you did today. You were so calm and confident. I had no idea you knew so much about flying. Emergency medical teams boarded the aircraft immediately. Captain Rodriguez was taken to the hospital where doctors confirmed he had suffered a heart attack, but would make a full recovery. First Officer James had experienced severe anxiety and dehydration, but was also going to be fine. After all passengers were safely evacuated, Sarah found herself surrounded by reporters, airport officials, and airline executives. She felt overwhelmed by the attention after spending her whole life trying to be invisible. Captain Williams met her in person at the gate. Sarah, I have been training pilots for 30 years, he told her. What you did today was extraordinary. You should seriously consider returning to commercial aviation. The industry needs pilots with your skills and composure. The story made headlines around the world. Quiet passenger becomes hero, and software engineer saves 150 lives appeared in newspapers everywhere. Sarah gave a few interviews but tried to avoid too much publicity. She was still the same person who preferred to stay in the background. I just did what my father taught me, she told reporters. He always said that knowledge and training are worthless unless you're willing to use them when people need help. Sarah returned to her job at Navtech Systems, but something fundamental had changed inside her. She had rediscovered her love for flying and her confidence in her abilities as a pilot. The trauma of her father's death had kept her on the ground for 5 years, but saving Flight 447 had helped her heal. 6 months later, Sarah made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She enrolled in an accelerated program to complete her commercial pilot certification. She realized that her father would have been proud of her for overcoming her fears and using her skills to help others. The airline industry welcomed Sarah with open arms. Her story had inspired many people and shown that heroes can come from the most unexpected places. Sarah completed her training quickly because of her strong foundation and real-world experience. Today, Sarah Chin flies as a commercial pilot for Pacific Airlines. She still prefers to keep a low profile, but her fellow pilots know they can count on her in any emergency situation. She often speaks to flight training schools about the importance of staying calm under pressure and trusting your education. The most important thing is not just technical knowledge, she tells student pilots. You need courage to act when lives depend on it, and confidence to trust your training even when everything seems impossible. The story of Flight 447 became legendary in aviation circles. It reminded everyone that heroes often look like ordinary people until circumstances demand extraordinary actions. Sarah had spent years trying to be invisible, but when crisis struck, She found her voice and became the leader that everyone needed. Sarah keeps a photo of her father in her flight bag. She knows he would be proud that she found the courage to fly again and use her skills to keep people safe. The quiet girl from seat 14A learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is stop being invisible and step forward when others need you.